Have you ever wondered why some God-chosen individuals seem to live away from the crowds in a quiet, almost secret space? There's a divine wisdom behind this seclusion. Today, we'll embark on a deep journey to discover 7 reasons why God often chooses to hide his chosen ones from a noisy, distracting society. As we explore each of these reasons, we'll understand that this solitude isn't just a place of withdrawal, but a true cradle of spiritual growth and preparation. When you think of isolation, what emotions does it bring to mind? It can be an invitation to reflection, an opportunity to connect more deeply with God and yourself. Each of us has a purpose far greater than what we see in our daily routine. As we discuss the importance of this sacred space, we'll evoke experiences of great biblical figures who, through silence and solitude, discovered not only their missions, but also a transformative intimacy with the Creator. Even if you're in a season of waiting or silence, remember, it's in this space that God shapes your being and prepares your calling. If you feel this calling echoing in your soul, subscribe now and join us on this journey of discovery and spiritual growth. Just as light is necessary for us to see the colors of the world, the divine calling shines in our hearts, revealing that each of us is chosen for a special purpose. Looking at Psalm 139:16, we find a profound truth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. This is more than a statement. It's the affirmation that, even before we were born, God had already designed a unique plan for us. When we talk about the nature of the divine calling, we are confronting the singularity of each destiny, traced by divine hands. Each person is a masterpiece, made in the image of God, with a purpose that can only be fulfilled in the way He conceived. Sometimes this calling leads us to a place far from the crowd, in a solitude that seems difficult to accept, but which is in fact the place of preparation. In this sacred space, God uses often painful or uncomfortable experiences to prepare us. Consider Moses, the man God chose to deliver his people. Before assuming this grand mission, he spent years in Midian, far from his former life in Pharaoh's palace. That period of isolation wasn't punishment, but training. He learned to shepherd sheep, which would be essential to later guide the people of Israel. Can you imagine how much God was shaping his character during those silent years? Solitude is a tool with which God works on our character, shapes our faith, and prepares us for the mission He has for us. If at any time you've felt forgotten or on the sidelines, know that it is in this solitude that God speaks loudest to the heart. In moments of quietude, we are invited to reflect on who we are and what purpose God has given us. When we view isolation as a tool for growth, we encounter the depth of the connection we can have with God. Let's consider Luke 5:16, where it says that He withdrew to desolate places and prayed. This act of withdrawal wasn't an escape, but an active search. Jesus, the Son of God, understood that to fulfill His mission, He needed to seek the Father's presence in moments of quietude. It's an invitation that extends to each of us. Throughout our daily lives, among obligations and challenges, what moments do you dedicate to withdrawing from the commotion and truly connecting with your Creator? Sometimes, to hear God's voice, we need to silence the noise around us, focusing our hearts on Him. People in the Bible, like Elijah and David, also went through periods of isolation that were crucial for their spiritual growth. Elijah, after confronting the prophets of Baal, fled to the desert, where he had a transformative encounter with God amidst the silence of solitude. It was there that he not only found physical sustenance, but also the breath of God's presence in his life. In the desert, he heard the gentle voice of the Lord, which brought him comfort and direction. David, before becoming king, spent years fleeing from Saul, living as a fugitive. Despite his situation, he continually sought God. The Psalms he wrote in his solitude are witnesses to his journey. He cried out in solitude, and the Lord answered, strengthening him and preparing him for the calling that was upon his life. These moments of withdrawal not only strengthened their faith, but also prepared the ground for the missions they would accomplish. Reflecting on your own life, you may feel lost in the crowd or pressured by external expectations. But think for a moment, what if this moment of isolation is exactly where God is seeking to shape your future? Your solitude is not a sign of abandonment, but a sacred opportunity to strengthen yourself, find your purpose, and hear the still, small voice of the Lord. Think of the times you found yourself pondering your challenges or frustrations. The truth is, In this space of quietude, God is working and forming you. It is in this silence that we can place our hearts before Him and allow Him to reveal who we truly are and what He desires from us. These periods of isolation may seem lonely and difficult, but it's worth remembering that great transformations often occur in the realm of solitude. When we are away from the crowds, we have the opportunity to step away from distractions and opinions that can hinder our understanding. It is in this space that we have the chance to delve deeper into God's Word, seeking answers and direction. Just as clay needs to be molded by the potter, we too are molded by the Lord. You may ask yourself, what is God trying to teach me in this moment? This is an essential question, inviting introspection and spiritual growth. Through withdrawal, God not only intensifies our connection with Him, but also gives us the chance to find the clarity we need to advance in the mission He has given us. The divine calling can be daunting in its magnitude, and it's natural to feel fear or insecurity. However, it is in solitude that we find courage. When we are quiet, we can hear the truth of God's Word resonating in our souls, reminding us that we are not alone. We know that He never abandons us, and even in the most challenging moments, His presence is our comfort. Embrace this call to isolation as a friend, not an enemy. It is in this space that His voice resonates most intensely. This is a call to you, an invitation to grow, to deepen your relationship with God, and to prepare for the great purpose He has for your life. May you always find beauty and meaning in this space of solitude, where God molds your faith and awakens you to your true identity. He chose you, and no one else will have the role you are to play in God's story, for you are unique, and your calling is precious. When we reflect on the crowd and its spiritual distractions, we are invited to open our eyes to the truth that living amidst the collective clamor can divert our focus from God's purpose for us. Modern life, marked by a frantic pace and constant digital connection, can quickly become a barrier to our spiritual growth. In Psalm 1:1, we find the warning, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers." This biblical wisdom is an invitation to reflect on the voices we allow to shape our lives. Here, it becomes clear that the crowd often brings more noise than clarity, and that the influence of others can lead us away from the path God desires for us. We live in a world where the opinions of others often carry disproportionate weight in our decisions. When surrounded by people who do not share the same faith or values, we risk compromising our purpose, setting aside what God has outlined for us. When we look at the lives of biblical figures who made the important decision to withdraw from the crowd, we realize that this choice proved fundamental to maintaining their spiritual clarity and discernment. A powerful example is that of the prophet Elijah. After the great victory over the prophets of Baal, he had to flee to the desert, facing the wrath of Queen Jezebel. It is in this moment of solitude that he found himself vulnerable, but also in deep communion with God. In the silence of the desert, he not only mourned his situation, but experienced an intimate encounter with God. That was the opportunity for spiritual replenishment that would shape his future. In the silence of the desert, God's presence became unmistakable. The clamor of the world around him quieted, allowing Elijah to hear the Lord's serene and comforting voice. When we are immersed in the hustle and bustle of life and the voices that surround us, we begin to worry more about external expectations and opinions than about what God truly says about us. This situation becomes a warning. When we are surrounded by external noise, God's voice can be easily muffled. Thus, it is crucial to create spaces of isolation in which we can truly focus on what He has to say to us. Within this context, it is essential to address the importance of preparation through silence. In Psalm 46:10, we are overtaken by the divine instruction, "Be still and know that I am God." This call to stillness teaches us that in moments of silence and contemplation, we find the true essence of who God is and what He desires for us. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is a sacred space where our spirit can calm and our mind can focus on the divine. It is in this space that we can truly hear and discern the voice of God, who guides and sustains us. Moses is another powerful example of the importance of preparatory silence. He spent a great deal of time in silence in the mountains, and this encounter with God not only brought him the law for the people of Israel, but also a deep communion that shaped his leadership. On Mount Sinai, Moses was not just receiving commandments, He was being molded and prepared to lead a nation. The experience was transformative not only for him, but also for all the people of Israel. In our daily lives, how many opportunities do we miss to quiet ourselves and listen to God's guidance? Silence enables us to discern not only God's will for our lives, but also His loving and compassionate nature. Our ability to reflect on and evaluate the direction of our lives is lost when we are overwhelmed by daily distractions. Silence helps to eliminate the confusion that often surrounds our minds. It is there that we can ponder our struggles, question our doubts, and allow God's peace to flood our being. When we are silent before the Lord, we open our hearts to supernatural guidance, a clear understanding that transcends human limitations. Have you ever experienced a moment where answers came to you not through hectic conversations or advice, but in the quiet of a sacred space? We may be surprised to discover that the power of silence not only clears the clutter in our minds, but also provides us with insight. As we dwell in silence, we become more open to the signs God gives us. He may speak through Bible verses that jump out at us, through gentle impressions on our hearts, or through revelations that come during prayer. The practice of silence makes us receptive to the subtle nuances of the divine presence. Imagine if each of us set aside intentional time each day to be silent in God's presence. What would He reveal to us in terms of our purpose and direction? Considering the vital connection between crowds and distractions and the relevance of silence, we must ask ourselves, how much time are we giving God to speak to us? Are you willing to step away from the crowd, turn off daily distractions, and quiet yourself in His presence? Silence is not a luxury, but a necessity. It is a sacred space of growth where God can mold our hearts and energize us for the journey. Ultimately, solitude and silence are not punishments, but opportunities for preparation. These sacred moments allow God to draw near to us, strengthen us, heal us, and prepare us for the divine mission He has in mind for us. Feel the hope that it is possible to hear God's voice in solitude. This is the hope we should cultivate in our hearts. May we increasingly seek this space of quietude and remain open to the direction He provides. The divine call awaits us, and the ideal setting to hear it can be found in the deep silence of our souls, where the essence of His word resonates in our hearts. It is in this space that we can truly experience the fullness of His presence and the depth of His love. When we talk about enriching intimacy with God, one of the most striking aspects we can observe is how isolation, away from the voices and distractions of the world, truly allows for a deeper connection with the Creator. A good example is the story of Moses, who went up Mount Sinai and was in God's presence for 40 days and 40 nights. Moses wasn't just receiving laws, he was in deep communion with God, shaping his identity and his calling. It was in this space of intimacy that Moses became the man who would lead Israel. He was surrounded by God, transformed by the experience, and this transformed not only him but also an entire people. Now, think about the times when you felt closest to God. Were they moments of turmoil, or were they the silent hours when you could seek the Lord in prayer? The truth is that isolation and distance from the noise of this modern world are powerful tools for deepening our relationship with God. Just as a garden needs to be cared for and nurtured away from traffic and pollution, our relationship with God thrives in a space away from everyday distractions. Have you ever stopped to reflect on the factors that frequently interfere with your communion with God? Are they the incessant messages from your phone, pending work, mail, or even social pressures? Each of us lives under a constant stream of distractions that can pull us away from what truly matters. Therefore, entering a space of solitude is not just desirable, but necessary to cultivate our spiritual life. We need this time to connect with God and rediscover the clear sky that hides behind the clouds that life sometimes brings. Furthermore, reflecting on the relationship we have with solitude and how it impacts our walk of faith is crucial. Often, the world paints isolation as a negative condition, something to be avoided at all costs. However, it is in this space of quietude that God can truly access the deep recesses of our hearts. The absence of external noise reveals many internal truths, both about who we are and about our journey. As we present ourselves before God, we are often confronted with truths we haven't considered before, and we can see our weaknesses, fears, and longings more clearly. When we contemplate the issue of trials and tribulations, we find a reality we cannot ignore. Isolation, often is also a time of testing. James 1:2-4 instructs us, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." What does this mean in our daily lives? The period of isolation can be a time when God teaches us to persevere, to have strength, and to depend on Him. All the great men and women of God faced trials, and this is an intrinsic part of the walk of faith, where each was shaped by difficulties and reserved by divine wisdom. When faced with life's challenges, we may feel that isolation is a place of despair, but in truth it is fertile ground where our faith is tested, and consequently strengthened. Each difficulty faced during these periods reminds us that God is working in us, preparing us for something great. Do you remember David, who spent years fleeing from Saul? Throughout those years, his faith was tested. In the end, David not only emerged as king, but also as a man after God's own heart, molded by the hardships he faced in his solitude. Solitude, therefore, can produce an abundant harvest if we have the courage to go through it. It is in the difficulties that we will find God's purposes for our lives. Many of us want the end results but hesitate to go through the process. Accepting the trial that comes from silence and solitude is a call to trust that, even amidst challenges, the Lord is with us, molding and perfecting our character, preparing us for the mission we have been called to. As we walk through these periods of isolation and trial, we must remember that this experience is underpinned by God's love. He does not leave us to cope alone. On the contrary, He is present, guiding us through every pain and every challenge. It is a time of growth and transformation where He is preparing us for something even greater. What seems to be a difficulty can transform into a powerful testimony to God's faithfulness. He doesn't promise to remove the storms, but He is always there, reminding us that with Him on board, we can face the waves. When we look at the moments when we are chosen to be in a state of isolation, let us remember that we are not alone. Moses, David, and so many others learned this throughout their journeys. Each test is an opportunity for us to grow. When we feel on the sidelines, it is a beautiful invitation to go deeper into our prayer life and communion with God. It is with this perspective that we should always seek that intimacy that is cultivated in the absence of distractions. We can find strength in trials and remember that, in solitude, we are molded for the glory of our Creator. Let us convey to everyone the message that, even in difficulties, God is present, transforming our character and preparing us for our divine mission. Thus, let us be grateful for the lessons we learn in isolation, for the answers we receive in silence, and for the new visions that are given to us in moments of solitude. May our journey of faith lead us closer to the heart of God, where we find not only comfort but also our true identity and calling. Each life experience aligning us to the place we are called to. This is a testament to divine beauty in action. May we from now on walk with courage and determination, knowing that each isolation is one more step on the journey that brings us closer to our Creator. When we reflect on why God hides His chosen ones, it is essential to understand that this hiding is part of a larger divine plan. God hides to reveal a central principle in the journey of faith. Throughout the Bible, we witness how hiding becomes a sacred space where the divine manifests itself profoundly. The story of Joseph, for example, serves as a powerful example. Sold into slavery and unjustly imprisoned, what seemed like a time of sorrow was, in fact, a period of essential preparation. In his hiding, God was shaping his character so that, in the future, he could not only govern Egypt but also save his family from famine. God often keeps His chosen ones in secret places because they are in a process of formation. Psalm 27:14 invites us, "Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart, wait for the Lord." These moments of waiting are essential for drawing closer to God, helping us discover our true identity and purpose. In fact, hiding is often a blessing in disguise. It is a time when God examines our hearts and shapes our lives in ways we cannot comprehend at the moment. These periods can be challenging, but they are necessary for our spiritual growth. Furthermore, hiding is not a place of stagnation. It is an environment of preparation. Darkness is where God empowers His chosen ones to rise when the time is right. Looking at the life of Moses, we see that after his experience at Sinai, he spent 40 years in the desert. During that time, God was preparing his heart to lead. Moses learned to depend on God every step of the way, and this learning lasted more than simply receiving laws. It was an intimate and transformative contact that made him a prophet and mediator between God and Israel. Jonathan, David's loyal friend, also lived this experience. Prince of Israel, Jonathan aligned himself with God's calling on David, even when it put him at risk. Between secret meetings and conversations in the desert, Jonathan understood that God's greater plan was in action. This time of hiding for both was not in vain, but rather a period of preparation for what God had in store. When God hides us, we need to be patient. The beauty and transformation that await those who remain steadfast often reveal themselves after periods of silence. Joseph's life transforms when he is called upon to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, showing that God reserves surprises after moments of concealment. Similarly, David, after years of persecution, finally sits on the throne, his preparation during isolation having been essential to becoming a righteous king. Considering the importance of being prepared during these seasons of obscurity, we must remember that solitude and silence should not be wasted. We need to actively pursue practices that build us up while we await God's revelation. This involves creating a sacred routine that includes prayer, reading the Word, and self-reflection. Meditation on Scripture is an essential practice to prepare us. When we read the Word, we focus on eternal truths, especially during times of uncertainty, strengthening our ability to hear and discern God's voice. Furthermore, we should be intentional in our daily prayer. Let us commit to dedicating specific time to prayer, bringing our concerns, doubts, and hopes to the Lord. A quiet space to connect with God allows us to sense His presence. Another valuable practice during these moments of preparation is researching the testimonies and experiences of others. Stories of figures like the martyrs of the faith remind us that we are not alone. They too faced periods of obscurity and trial, revealing God's ever-present providence in their lives. Keeping a spiritual journal can be a powerful tool. Documenting prayers, feelings, and reflections on what God is doing in our lives provides a record of hope. We can see how God has been present, even in the most difficult moments, and this encourages us to continue on the path. Looking back reveals that each experience of obscurity was a chapter in the beautiful story God was writing. In this process, it's important to remember that God is not distant during our hidden time. He is shaping you. This is a time of eternal formation and restoration. The greatness of your future in God is being forged here, and it is up to you to remain open. By being prepared, you become more Christ-like, understanding that each hidden moment is a fundamental part of your calling. When the time of revelation finally arrives, the rewards of obedience and patience will be grand. The beauty of being chosen by God will reveal itself in its fullness. May we always wait with hope and confidence, recognizing that each hidden moment is a divine preparation for something greater that God has in store for us. May we, through solitude and waiting, draw closer to our Creator and prepare ourselves for the great things to come. Analyzing biblical examples of isolation, we see that the experiences of figures like Elijah and David are profound and full of lessons that teach us about the importance of obscurity in divine preparation. Let's start with Elijah, who, after challenging and overcoming the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, was forced to flee to the desert because of the threat from Queen Jezebel. He hid in a cave, feeling defeated and abandoned. However, this moment of despair turned into a new beginning. In a state of weakness, God manifested himself to Elijah not with thunder or lightning, but in a gentle whisper. This reminds us that, even in the darkest moments, the divine presence never abandons us. This experience of obscurity was fundamental to re-energizing Elijah, who received new direction from God, promptly reminded that he still had a mission to fulfill. David's story, on the other hand, is another powerful illustration of the need for periods of isolation. David spent years fleeing from Saul, facing constant dangers and uncertainties. This time was not only a test of his faith, but also an opportunity to deepen his relationship with God. During these years, David wrote many psalms, expressing his inner struggle, his prayers, and his unwavering trust in divine sovereignty. Isolation molded David into a righteous and reverent leader, a man after God's own heart. His ability to transform suffering into praise highlights how adversities lived in communion with God offer profound spiritual growth. These narratives reveal to us that periods of isolation are often God's chance to begin His powerful work in us. When we face challenges, we must remember that we are not abandoned, but that we are in a process of preparation. What we can learn from the experience of Elijah and David is that often the greatest callings arise from the most unexpected places. In our own periods of obscurity, we may discover that God is shaping our hearts and preparing us for a mission that can impact not only our lives, but also the lives of many around us. The journey of the chosen may, indeed, seem lonely. Although the call is for all of us, in many moments of isolation, we may feel alone. However, the truth is that God is always present. Psalm 139, 7-10 assures us that there is nowhere we can flee from His presence. This certainty is a comfort in our solitude. Even when we feel distant, we can cry out to Him with the assurance that He hears us. The calling may not manifest immediately. We are called to trust in His divine wisdom. The process is often long and can be full of uncertainties, but we must cultivate hope, knowing that each experience has an eternal and profound value. Now, considering the importance of being prepared during these times of obscurity, we must acknowledge that time spent in solitude and silence should not be wasted. Instead, we should intentionally seek practices that build us up as we await God's revelation. This involves establishing a sacred routine where prayer, reading the Word, and self-reflection become priorities in our lives. An essential practice to keep us prepared is meditation on God's Word. When we delve into the Scriptures, we focus on eternal truths that sustain us in times of uncertainty. When we remember Jesus' words, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," we can find comfort and direction. This strengthens our faith and helps us maintain a heart sensitive to His voice. Furthermore, we should make prayer an intentional daily practice. Setting aside specific time for prayer, even if just for a few minutes, can provide a sacred space to bring our concerns, doubts, and hopes before the Lord. Creating a peaceful and conducive environment to connect with God can heighten our awareness of His presence. Equally vital is reading testimonies of others who have faced similar challenges. Stories of biblical figures, such as the martyrs and prophets, show us that we are not alone. These encouraging accounts reveal how God was present during their struggles, preparing them for what lay ahead. Finally, keeping a spiritual journal is a powerful tool that helps us reflect on our journey. By documenting prayers, feelings, and reflections, we can trace the thread of God's presence throughout our lives and see how He has been working, even in times of obscurity. As we prepare, let us remember that God is not distant. He is shaping our hearts and lives. Let this time of formation be an opportunity to draw closer to Him. Each season of waiting is a preparation for a greater calling. Therefore, when the right time comes, the reward for our obedience and patience will be glorious. Let us wait with confidence and faith, recognizing that every season of waiting and obscurity is full of meaning. God's calling is for all of us, always revealing His wisdom and perfect timing. The journey of those chosen is full of challenges, but also brimming with promises and blessings. It is a testament to the beauty of the plan God has for us, and we are invited to be a part of this divine story, allowing ourselves to be shaped for a greater purpose.